Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to do Writing as a Nurse Drafting Interview Questions. This is one of our accelerated lunch hour webinars, so if you're joining us on your lunch break and you need to skedaddle on the hour, don't worry, we'll let you out at least 10 minutes ahead. So let's dive in. If you are new to the Writing Center, we work with students in almost every ACU online program. We do not charge. We are available through a variety of means, through webinars such as this, through asynchronous appointments where you schedule a time, upload your paper before that time, and we send you feedback via email, and via phone and Zoom appointments. We have a variety of resources available on our website, more on that in a little bit. But let me just explain the difference between the different appointment types. First, whenever you contact us, however that takes place, we are happy to help. If you are just looking for feedback on a draft and you have a set of questions, awesome. You can include that in appointment notes. You can send us an email. If you have a really quick question or a specific thing about, say, how to cite this source or how to format this specific thing, you can send us an email. No problem. No need to sign up for an appointment for that. If you have a lot of questions that you'd like to ask and get answers for in real time so that you can ask follow-up questions, or perhaps you're wondering how to do something and you just would like to see it demonstrated, and that's a good candidate for a phone or Zoom appointment. And for those, just send us an email to Online Writing Center at ACU. And then, of course, in a webinar such as this, you are more than welcome to ask questions. We have a lot of webinars coming up this term, and I just wanted to include a small sampling, but particular emphasis on those that are of interest to students in our nursing programs. We have Writing as a Nurse Tips for DNP Students on Sunday. The week after that, after the 4th of July holiday, we're back with Writing as a Nurse Policy Briefs. We have a live edit session for doctoral projects. So if you are a nursing student and you are working on a piece of what will become your DNP project, you're more than welcome to attend, and if you'd like, to volunteer your manuscript, because we're always looking for volunteers for samples of student writing. Writing a doctoral project is an endeavor that takes many revisions, and more eyes help, and we try and give you some insights into the process, as well as the benefit of a trained editorial eye. All right, we also have a webinar focused on diagrams and flowcharts, and then another one coming up on policy analysis. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you can track what's most relevant to you in your studies. We have some people who watch the webinars as part of a kind of ongoing professional development, whether or not they're enrolled in that class yet. And that's totally okay, more than welcome to do that. But I've prepared here a guide that shows you the course alignments for webinars that you can watch right now. So if, say, you are in Nursing 712, well, that class culminates in a methodology paper. And so we have a webinar on that, and like all of our webinars, it's recorded when it's offered. And you could go ahead and add to your calendar, 2 weeks before this assignment, I'm going to watch that webinar. And I'll show you in a little bit some other stuff that we've done to make it easy to find relevant courses. Some things that you'll see me talking about and referencing later, we have an APA course paper template that does a lot of the formatting stuff for you. We also post our videos not just to the Writing Center website, but also to our YouTube channel. And we have the Online Writing Center blog that has the explorations of special topics of interest to students. So before we dive into our main objectives for today, I just wanted to show you something new with the Writing Center website. And by new, this is something that we launched for summer 2 term. So if you're familiar with the Writing Center website, great. This is something on top of that. So let me go ahead and I'm going to change my sharing around now. And you should now see the Online Writing Center website. And the Online Writing Center website, if I go to resources and I select webinars from this list, webinars that are under services, my bad. Services, writing webinars. And you'll see at the top, we've got the schedule of all the webinars that are coming up this term. And then at the bottom, there is a complete listing of all our webinar recordings. But in the middle, this is something new. So I've gone ahead and I've created a guide by department or degree program. So, for example, if you're in the nursing program, whether you're BSN to DNP or the post MSN DNP track, if you go ahead, we can see we have every webinar listed by the course that it's relevant. So if you're, say, in Nursing 631, you can see, oh, yep, we've got something about the Week 5 health promotion assignment. If you're taking 701, you can see, oh, we have stuff for 2 different assignments here. And then Nursing 721, that's one where there's a new webinar that's being offered this term, and once the recording is available, it'll be listed here. So this is updated every term as we add new webinar recordings, and I encourage you to check back here because it is a growing body of support materials. All right, with that, let us go back to our slide deck and dive into the main content that we're exploring today. So what are we going to be doing? Well, we are going to be focusing on the particular assignment that in Nursing 721 that asks you to write interview questions and to describe some of the preparation for an interview. So we're going to review the characteristics of effective research interview questions, which aren't always the same thing as journalistic interview questions. We're going to look at the specific week 1 assignment in Nursing 721, and then we're going to review a couple core principles for outlining this assignment. And again, we should have you out well in time to be done by the end of your lunch break. All right, so what are some of the characteristics of effective research interview questions? Well, some of it's going to depend on what kind of data we're looking for, what kind of study you're going to be doing. And there are some main research methodologies that's helpful to keep in mind. One, what kind of research in terms of what kind of data we're getting. So qualitative data and qualitative research is dealing with phenomena that can be observed, but not really measured in very quantitative or objective terms. So how do you feel about something? That is a qualitative question. And how much money do you have in the bank is a quantitative question. And mixed methods is just mixing these two things. So a classic example of mixed methods research would be you give someone a questionnaire that has all these yes/no answers and ask them to pick numbers and things like that. And then you also have interview questions where you ask, like, well, what are some terms that you use to describe this? Or what would you suggest be done? And that's all fine. It just depends on the particular problem that you're trying to address and what you believe, based on your research and lit review, what you believe is the most effective way to go about doing that. So what are some characteristics? Well, interview questions should, generally speaking, be qualitative. If you have a lot of things that are quantitative, a survey is usually a more efficient means. And I'm not saying that you can't administer a survey in an interview, but usually what happens is it just happens that this is a better way of getting people to do it than sit down at a computer because of the setting or something like that. And so you might use this as you're asking the questions and checking off the responses for them. So that is just administering the survey orally as opposed to asking them interview questions should be qualitative. And a good interview question should also solicit a complex response, which usually means that it's going to be an open-ended or semi-structured process. So what does that mean? Well, if it's just one or a few words, then a survey would be a more efficient way of collecting that. You know, a survey with a fill in the blank or a yes/no selector, as depending on the question. You want to have opportunities for expansion, and the questions and the interview should allow you to learn about and explore things that you didn't anticipate. And the reverse of being overly narrow, not letting people explain their answers, is often a weakness in an interview process. You want your interview questions to be aligned with the purpose of the study. So this should ultimately take you towards where you want to be. And there may be standard demographics or something like that you collect. But again, it's more of the survey format. You want the interview questions to help you accomplish whatever you're setting out to do. And you want the interview questions to be aligned with the primary and secondary research questions. In general, interview questions are used to answer secondary research questions or primary research questions if you don't have any secondary ones, because by collecting these answers to related things, you're then able to go ahead and answer the bigger questions, the bigger picture questions, where if you were asking the person you're interviewing to give the solution, that's probably either your research questions are too narrow or it's actually something that's well researched already and the interview is a little redundant. You also want to have non-biased and non-leading wording. What's an example? Well, if you saw insert description here, you of course would report things right away. How should this be punished? Now that this is as introducing some bias immediately, say, oh, you would do that, and then also has that assumption that this should be punished. And so even if the person doesn't believe that normally, the question is kind of disposing them to answer, well, okay, if it's going to be punished, we should do X, Y, or Z, as opposed to any other action that may be taken. So a better wording for a similar inquiry would be, okay, well, if you saw this thing, what would you do? What do you believe is an appropriate institutional response, if any? And then you can go one step further and add a why, because the reasons for an action can be even more important than the action itself when you're trying to figure out what is the most effective response. You also want to avoid the common error of mixing up your terminology and calling a prompt a question. So questions should always be ending with a question mark in APA style. Now, you have a prompt, an interview prompt, can include a question. It could be a question, but the prompt is a more general term, and it can also include statements that are designed to elicit a response from the interviewee. Like, tell me about a time when you wanted to do this thing. So in some of the literature and some assignments, you will see that questions and prompts get used synonymously, but let's be particular about that. If you have a mixture of questions and statements that are designed to elicit a response, just call them interview prompts together. And then you don't end up in a situation where you say, okay, well, this is interview question 6, and then get marked down because it's not actually a question, it's a prompt. So now I talked about how the question should align with the research design. And so, well, operating under a presumption that you're probably starting with doing qualitative interview questions, what kind of research design are you going to be using? Is it going to be a single case study where you're exploring one occurrence or institution or set of people to understand something? Are you comparing multiple case studies? Are you writing an ethnography, which is about why people do what they do? Grounded theory, which is you're trying to create a theory that explains something. Historical, where it's more of just retrospective analysis. Let's understand what happened back then. Narrative research, where the storytelling and how that's told is at the heart of the project. And phenomenology, which is really trying to understand something that's going on. And that can be very general or very specific. Just present these quantitative things because it does come up sometimes, but it's less likely that you would be drafting interview questions if you're doing any of these designs. So just be aware of that. You also want to keep in account the framework that you're using, whether this is a theoretical framework, meaning the lens that you're looking at things is derived from a theory or set of theories, or if it's a conceptual framework where you're, say, applying a model or a framework or a combination of different things. And this is just an extra slide in case you're not sure if you're working on a conceptual or theoretical framework. All right, now, why is this important? Well, because that framework that you choose determines what you pay attention to and what you focus on within the larger problem that's being studied. And because of that, that helps guide the methodology. Okay, are we working with qualitative or quantitative data or both? And what are the big questions that we're trying to answer? The primary and secondary research questions. And based on that, what do we need to know to answer those questions? That's where the interview questions come in, where we're looking to find out the information we need to answer the big questions. All right, at this point, we're going to zero in on Nursing 721's Week 1 Issues in Healthcare Reform Part 1 assignment. So this is coming up in the Healthcare Policy and Clinical Practice course. And let's just review those instructions. Throughout the course, you will be working on several assignments addressing a specific healthcare policy issue. This week, you will select a specific healthcare policy issue that is important to you and that you will study throughout this course. You will analyze this healthcare policy issue from many angles to understand the policy development process. Now, I will say, I've had several DNP students where the issue that they picked here for this course ended up being what they did for their DNP project. Not saying that all the details were set, but the general issue they made more specific and eventually built their whole project on it. So if there's something you really, really want to research, this is a good time to test the waters. All right, so you need to identify the chosen healthcare policy issue, and you're also required in a later week to interview a governmental employee or politician regarding that issue. So that means that you're going to have to interview them, and that means you're going to have to figure out who they are, identify them, and contact their office and conduct the interview. So for this assignment, you need to develop, among other things, a list of questions for the interview to explore this healthcare policy issue. And there's some suggestions about potential questions you might include. You need to include a paragraph summary of the issue, and then at least 5 questions. All of this in a paper of 1 to 2 pages, not counting the title page or the references. And an APA style, of course. So let's go ahead and break down this rubric a little bit. So the first item, evaluate a healthcare policy issue and include a summary of it, including the impact of the issue on the population of interest. All right, so if we're following the basic principle of before everything else, make sure you list everything that the rubric asks and demands, and that you put in a note to make sure that you do that to yourself. Well, all right. If you have that, that's text in gray here, then you know that you're going to want to sentence something on the lines of this first bullet. This thing is a significant healthcare policy issue for whatever group or entity. And then it says, okay, well, give us a summary of it. All right, so this issue is, and then describe it, and it negatively affects whoever it does because, and then you list the reasons. And you want to align your wording with the prompt so it's clear that you are identifying the exact things that the prompt is asking you to do. All right, the next row there identifies the politician to be interviewed and why they're appropriate. Okay, all right, well, tell us, okay, what were you doing? Well, to gather information on this issue, I interviewed, or I will interview if you haven't done it yet, and then list their name, tell us about them. For example, if here in Minnesota, if I said, well, I'm planning on interviewing Senator, my senior senator there, then I'd say, okay, I will interview Senator Amy Klobuchar, for example. And then I would explain why they're appropriate to that for the thing that I'm investigating. Are they involved in activism? Are they a stakeholder? Whatever it should be. All right, and so explain that. Say why they're appropriate, and that can certainly be more than one sentence, but make sure that there's a clear rationale and not just, oh, they're a random person. It could be that they are one of your government representatives or other elected officials. It could be that they're in your region or they worked on something similar. Just tell us whatever it is. And then you're also going to need to have at least 5 questions. And I'd recommend doing a few more, but well, start with the required 5 and see where you end up. All right, so we want to explain your choices, and this is where reading the whole rubric comes in very handy, because the instructions say that this paper should be 1 to 2 pages, and it says, okay, include that paragraph about the issue. All right, so that's going to be maybe half a page, and so you have at least another half a page, possibly up to a page and a half more to write. And so what are the kinds of things you could write about? Well, tell us why those questions are important. What are they designed to elicit? For things that are open-ended, what kinds of things that will you do to steer them to give more information? If it's semi-structured interviews, how might you follow up to the preliminary questions? And also, how might you analyze or make sense of the interview data? And there are other things where you will learn later on in your studies about how to do, say, thematic analysis and such. But for now, it's good to look and say, okay, well, with these questions, what kind of information will you get, and how do you propose to make sense of that? You look for things that they say that are frequent, perhaps. Are you trying to just collate and compare a list of responses? What do you want to do, and how can the data inform it? And therefore, what kind of analysis do you need to know what the data is actually telling you? So I promised you a briefer webinar here. And so here we are. We have covered the main content here in just 25 minutes. So this is an excellent time to ask any questions that you might have. I see a question there about, okay, so the question is, can you ask a yes/no question in an interview? And the answer to that is yes, but you probably don't want to unless it's a leading question. Let me explain. So if it's something where you will ask them a different question and based on whether they say yes or no, absolutely. You'd probably use a bulleted outline with your interviews to show, okay, this is the sub-question 1, sub-question 2. So if they say yes, I will ask them this other question. If they say no, I will ask them this question here. And that's perfectly fine, because the yes or no is to clarify the exact question that you're answering, the exact question that you're asking, and to really get at what you want. And so not waste your time by reading all the questions and then making them pick on their own. So that is certainly possible to use yes or no questions, but they're not the main interview questions. They're leading in the sense that they lead into picking the exact questions off the list where you're going to get those more complex answers. Another question, okay, the difference between a survey and an instrument. So in the context of social science research, the kind of research we write about in APA style, and this does to some extent include the nursing sciences as well. In the context of social science research, we use the term instrument to refer to anything that can gather data. And so whether that is like a formal survey questionnaire that is printed out, whether it's a survey they do on the computer, whether it's a questionnaire that's being tested and validated, whatever those different variations on it, that those materials that ultimately have the content that's delivered to collect data, like those questions, that is referred to as an instrument. Now, you might understand that as a shorthand for data collection instrument. Now, if it's an online survey, then it's a survey. If you print it out, it's still a survey. So a survey is a type of instrument, but there are others as well. So, for example, one type of qualitative analysis will involve interviewing people, usually with open-ended questions, semi-structured interviews, and then they'll do a word cloud analysis. And okay, what did they say the most? What words were said the most? And from that, you can derive some ideas if there are clear trends. Oh, they mention this thing a lot. This suggests that, at least in the context of the discussion, this might be more important. And that's has a particular scope where that works very well, but it's an example of the kinds of things that you might do. Another thing that comes up with that is who is doing the analysis? Is it software or are you doing it by hand? Now, you could go ahead and, create an Excel spreadsheet that has entries for each time a word is said in an interview. That is more work than you probably want to do. There are plenty of programs and web tools out there for free that you can use to do that kind of analysis. So, if it looks like it will involve lots of counting on your hands, you might ask your professor, colleagues, or send an email to the writing center at the library, depending on the exact thing you're asking about, to see if there's a tool that can be used for that. And that's something we field questions like that all the time. So, any other questions? All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to say we are done. Thank you for attending this week's webinar, and I will look forward to seeing you at a later one and return the other half hour of your lunch break to you. Have a good day, all of you.